Welcome to Focus on Why, the podcast where reflection sparks action. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and together we'll explore compelling stories, profound insights, and transformative experiences from inspiring guests worldwide. Feeling lost or unfulfilled? Searching for clarity, purpose, or meaning in your work and life? This podcast invites you on a journey of self-discovery to align your work with your values, shape your future with intention, and create a purposeful way of life. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we begin, have you read my new book yet? Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life is co-authored with my late grandfather, George Fleming Kerr, and weaves in poignant journal entries detailing his experiences and insights of the 5 years he spent in captivity during World War II. Honest and heartfelt, this uplifting guide acts as your companion for life. Available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. Check the show notes for links to get your copy today. Today on Focus on Why, I'm joined by Harrison Ward. Harrison, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to bring you on the show and share what it is you do. So why don't we just kick off the conversation with what is it you're focusing on at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think focusing on particularly one thing at the moment is quite a difficult one for me to nail down on, I guess. I'm one of those people that's always floating off in different directions, but I've had a few challenges this year, I guess, just in my personal life, perhaps. I lost my father at the start of the year, so that's been quite a difficult thing to manage. So there's a lot of focus going on that at the moment of sorting out, the aftermath of that, the estate, and the unfortunate property clearance. He was a bit of a hoarder, my dad, so that's taken a lot of time. Particularly the fact is he was down in Devon and I'm up in Cumbria, so logistically it's a bit difficult. But otherwise, we're juggling plates sort of business-wise going forward and also trying to maintain, I suppose, my own sanity amongst that sort of path. So like life normally, it's a bit pillar to post, but again, we can never sort of foretell these things at times, so I have to sort of take them as they come. So my focus is just on keeping progress, I think, at the moment, keep progress moving forward and also planning the future, but never too far ahead. I'm quite a one day at a time approach, so my focus isn't looking too far over the horizon.
Yeah, I hear you. And sometimes it's great to have a plan that spans several years, but you need to have some flexibility in what it is that you want to get involved in.
For sure. And life doesn't come with a plan, does it? You can sort of, you can focus on certain areas, you can push yourself down certain paths and take the opportunities when they come, but sometimes things present themselves either as hurdles or as future opportunities. So you have to be there to embrace those sometimes, to ride over those hurdles. And again, it's that up and down. I mean, I've found a lot of times in my life personally, it has been a lot of ups and downs at various times, and sometimes big mountains and big valleys. But these days, hopefully, slightly more peaks and troughs, slightly more controlled, a slightly steadier, your line going through that. But it will always have its challenges. There'll be more to come, I'm sure. But again, it's in that change sometimes that we find other purpose. So yeah, there is a privilege to this time as well at certain bits, as difficult as it has been.
What for you is the difference between a peak and a trough and a hill and a valley?
Well, I think, previously, if I take sort of back to where my life was, it was kind of all over the place. It wasn't a very structured life at all. I was suffering quite a lot of my mental health from my teenage years and subsequently finding myself using alcohol as a means of trying to shut down those thoughts. So I suppose my real valleys or crevasses at the time really were kind of moments where I didn't really want to be here. I didn't really want to move forward with life. I felt as if I had no purpose at all. I didn't really know what direction I was going. I felt quite lost and misunderstood. So there was many moments, I guess, I was really dragging myself off that crevasse floor to go forward with each day. Well, I suppose the high points in that, there were some great times amongst that too. You look back at a time that, my life was dictated by that. My sole focus each day was just finding another drink. I was working in the hospitality trade at the time, so I was well embracing that kid in a sweet shop vibe, I suppose. I was in amongst that culture, but did love that element as well. There was some great times, which of course get brushed over in what is looked at as perhaps a darker time in my life. So they were highs, but sometimes maybe I always see people on different scales of sort of happiness. Some people, maybe their lowest is only ever a 5, yet their highest is a 10. Whereas me, it felt like, my lowest was certainly a 0, even sort of sub-zero at times. But maybe my high point was maybe not as high as others would reach, but it was more of a contentness. So it was a very volatile time, I suppose, of ups and downs and using sort of substance, I suppose, that was really taking me in directions where relationships, were failing financially, very poor. My health wasn't very good. So I was functioning but not very well. I guess I was kind of hiding all this beneath the surface. Whereas these days it feels like there are still hills to climb. And obviously recently there's been ones that are slightly higher than the previous ones, but it never feels as if I've dropped much further down. I'm certainly not going back to square one. I'm happy to say I'm over 9 years sober from those days back in 2016. Very much move forward, that sort of thing, living a very different life, a lot more open and accountable to my actions. So therefore, I think I don't fall as far when there are those moments. I have that more of a safety net, and means that I'm able to cope better, coping mechanisms where previously I would have fallen back on maybe drinking myself to oblivion once again on the receiving bad news or even receiving good news. Perhaps it was always celebration and commiseration. So I suppose that explains somewhat in my own personal understanding of what I mean by, I guess, mountaintops from crevasses as opposed to peaks and valleys. It's it's still a roller coaster of life, but not quite as not quite the Pepsi Max as they used to have in Blackpool is not quite the big drop.
And these metaphors using hills, valleys, peaks, mountains, crevasses, any reason that you choose those?
Well, I always like a metaphor, to be fair. I always like sort of a visual sort of analogy. So that, in one sense, it sometimes creates that mental image of what you were going through. But myself too, I mean, the outdoors has played a huge part in sort of turning my life around. I was brought up in Cumbria. I was from Carlisle, originally on the doorstep of the Lake District, for those that know it, in the north of England on the Scottish border. But really didn't embrace what was there for many, many years. I loved the outdoors. I played a lot of sort of sports and bits out there, and used to go down the woods with friends, and was blessed really to grow up in a rural area, but didn't embrace sort of the mountains or hiking that's on the doorstep at all. I mean, I often joke, the closest I came was just popping down to the local town on a day trip with your parents, maybe, or my mum rather, just going for a bag of fish and chips or coffee and cake. You'd look at these views, you'd experience the beauty of them, but I wouldn't embrace going walking up them. Why would you want to go and do that? But it was coming back when I was living in York at the time. I went there for university. And when life completely sort of tumbled beneath me, 6th of June 2016, I had this big sort of breakdown and really revelation, the fact that alcohol was dominating my life, and something had to change. I came back to Cumbria and tried to really throw myself into fitness to try and, I suppose, fill that void that alcohol was now leaving. Because leaving that behind, it was such a key part both of my career. I left my studies behind. I went full-time into the trade, working up to management. But also everything I did, it was my social. I was known as a big drinker. It was my personality, and leaving that behind was quite a sort of metamorphosis, really, sort of shedding that skin, moving forward. And at the time, again, I was 22 stone in weight. I was a smoker. I was very lethargic lifestyle. So I wasn't the sort of person who looked like they were going out, walking or running down the local lake every day or in the woodland. I was living a very different lifestyle. But trying to throw myself into fitness was a big thing that helped me pull myself out from those darker pits. And a close friend of mine actually turned up at my doorstep and said, come on, let's go for a hike in the Lake District. And it was really like that. It was really, this was the second week of coming home, going cold turkey, which again, not advisable with the amounts I was drinking at the time, but having my whole life and sort of what you'd grown and who you believed you are just disappearing beneath you in a way through my own actions. It was a real uncertain time, I guess, unsteady time, one that really I was just trying to pick myself up off that floor and move forward and try and be accountable, to really redeem myself, I suppose, in certain ways. But having that first hike with that friend, getting dragged up Blencathra it was at the moment, for those that know, one of the bigger mountains in the Lake District, so a bit of a baptism of fire. But reaching that sort of summit top and feeling that sense of, achievement and that endorphin hit, that was giving me that great high that was a much, much longer lasting high without that negative mark, that alcohol, I was seeking from alcohol, I suppose. So it was something I really embraced going forward. I like that solitude. I like the fact that a lot of menial stresses in life were put in perspective out in nature. It really felt like a place that we belonged and were designed to be in. And I appreciate also there was privilege in the fact that I grew up in an area like this. This was on my doorstep, and many people, don't see this sort of thing and discover it later in life. And it took me a lot longer, but it really was the sort of thing that pulled me out that mire and became a big healing elixir for me going forward.
And you said that your friend dragged you up, but there had been a point when you just went cold turkey. Had there been a particular catalyst or a conversation you had with yourself or someone that triggered it?
Yeah, there absolutely was. Yeah, I mean, there maybe should have been this initial moment back on my 21st birthday. I had a lot of friends that came to visit me in York, to have a particularly big liquid celebration, I suppose, sort of bar to bar in the town. And it was one of those that, one by one, these friends began sort of going back home to where they were from, where some were still from Cumbria, some had moved elsewhere around the country now. But I was really quite alone in this city at the time. I was doing well sort of in my work side of things. I had a lot of, I suppose, acquaintances and friends in that city, but they were supposed they were suiting the lifestyle I was in too. It was very much, that sort of first thing I got up, it was off to the pub at 11 o'clock in the morning when it opened to the early hours every day. So brushing my teeth with the stuff at one point, it literally was my sole focus every day going forward. So there was a moment there that this inner turmoil I'd had since about sort of 13. I wasn't drinking until I was about 18, but I was always having this feeling of inadequacy and sort of vulnerability and insecurity throughout my school time. And I put on a bit of a mask, in honesty. I don't want to bring people down sort of with what I was thinking. I didn't want to be a burden to people at all. So I guess I just sort of wore that as my cross to bear and just kind of carried on. But I had a moment on my 25th birthday once all these friends had gone home where I picked up a payphone in the early hours to call home. And I called my mum, and I had one intention on the call really, and it was to say goodbye. Um, I didn't feel like I could go on any further. Alcohol was no longer providing that escape from my own sort of mental turmoil. And I saw no other way out. But thankfully, that wasn't obviously to be the case. I did come back to Cumbria at the time. I sought a bit of medical support, but I wasn't willing to change, as I mentioned at that point. So I booked myself a train back to York and continued this same path for another 5 years. And it was during this time I found myself in a relationship, and that was really the big catalyst for this change. Sadly, it wasn't, a positive story in this setting. Someone I deeply loved at the time. It was a serious relationship going in there, about to move in together. But I was living two relationships, one with the alcohol, one with her, and the two, didn't clash very well at all. One was definitely put in front of the other, and I was almost under this sort of spell, I guess, the spell of addiction in a way, just the puppeteer, like you were on strings, and just that was always ahead of everything else. Always put that ahead of everybody. And I mentioned not wanting to be that burden, but it's exactly what I was becoming to people, to those around me. I was causing hurt to those. I wasn't being reliable. I was, turned up sort of inappropriately in certain situations, but never an aggressive individual or anything. Just using this tool to try and really sedate myself and get myself through each day. But one particular time I went out under the influence and I acted unfaithfully to this partner, which rightly so was the end of that relationship. But it really pulled me out of that spell altogether. The fact that I didn't believe I was this person. I believed I was a loyal person. I was an honest person, but I was acting in exactly the opposite way at this point. And I was almost, again, under that influence of the drink. I couldn't blame the alcohol for this because they were my actions. I had to be accountable for that. I couldn't say, oh, I wouldn't have done this without that. Whilst that may have been the case, I had done that. And it really just pulled me down in that mire. I came to terms with the fact I was an alcoholic, how I saw it at the time. That relationship rightly ended, although I did try and seek that path to really bring that back. And that was a big catalyst for me to try and prove I could be that change. There was a quote I loved about the fact that, change behavior was the best apology. And that was kind of really something I was pushing at all times to try and really get myself through this. Well, almost started to begin, it felt like a bit like an 80s movie montage as things went on. And I was throwing myself into fitness there and running up the hillside and down the gym and throwing my last pack of cigarettes in the bin. But wasn't to be sort of that relationship coming back full term, but really discovering, relationship with myself and those around me in other ways, becoming a much more reliable, son and brother and nephew and friend. And it was really the right decision, but perhaps for the wrong reasons initially. But it was having that moment of really, I suppose, questioning your character through my own actions was really the moment that pulled me out of that mire. And was my rock bottom moment. There was two ways I could have gone at that moment, and really one was shuffling off this mortal coil, or the other one was trying to pick myself back up and getting to the top of that mountain.
And Harrison, throughout all of this, did the inner turmoil return?
Yeah, so it's something that for me, it was there long before obviously the alcohol came into my life and things here. You see a lot in sort of the alcohol recovery circuits, I think, that a lot of blame for the substance. And for me, the substance was the escapism to it, was the coping method at times. And a lot of this I always boil down to the fact that we just want to be happy ultimately. We want to find happiness through any means possible. And some may find that in, darker vices, others may find that in more positive vices. And I tried to switch that on its head to more exercise feel bits out there, more fulfillment through relationships and things. But yeah, it was one of those that I guess, riding that high in those early days was certainly something that, you're pulling out and going through this huge change. I remember mentally feeling like there was almost like a big lead balloon in my brain through sort of pining for my ex, going through that withdrawal again, stopping smoking at the same time as well, and just going off that and just really pushing myself through this change. And one day almost feeling like a pin had just popped that balloon in my head and had this real, don't know, it's almost like weightlessness sort of feeling, really. A lot of emotion coming in, a lot of things, and a lot of things I hadn't understood going forward that I suppose I'd masked and hidden and put away for so long, coming back into view. But for a while, I mean, I was on a very steady path. Again, I carved this. I was climbing lots of mountains over the country out there. I started running quite a lot. And again, I couldn't run a bath when I first started, but I was running sort of a couple of K to 5K to 10, and ultimately running a marathon in May 2017. So less than a year from that turnaround point, now crossing the line, a real redemption moment for me. 7 stone lighter, nearly a year sober at that point. Life had changed completely. I got myself in a good job at the time. I was working in e-commerce, in sort of a shipping sector, a local business here. I'd moved to the Lake District, and things were really, really picking up for me. And I continued on that path really. Around this time as well, I started calling myself the Fell Foodie, which I'm sure we'll come to in a second. But it was also a point that life was going pretty well for me. I really felt as if I'd become the person I wanted to be for most of my life. And I was really glad that, those darker days hadn't really grabbed a hold of me completely and ultimately caused that act. But I did find lockdown very tough. That was a moment that a lot of things came back to me. Obviously, there was temptation around alcohol has often reared its head. I mean, I've just tried not to be complacent. I mentioned that sort of one day at a time approach. That's how I view a lot of things going forward. As early in those early points of trying to be sober every day, it was just trying to reach midnight each night of staying sober. But lockdown was a point that, again, I felt very guilty, feeling bad during that point, because I was in the Lake District. I was in a beautiful place. I had work during the time. There was a lot of much worse circumstances and situations that people were in during those moments. Yeah, I couldn't help to really feel as if I was falling back a little bit into that path, because a lot of my positive outlets had disappeared. I was going to the gym every day, and the gyms had all shut down, of course. I had the mountains on my doorstep, but mountain rescue and things were rightly saying, not to go into the hills in case something happened, because you could then expose those volunteers to COVID in various bits. And even sort of whilst that neighbourly love and sort of community really came into force, there was also moments where everyone was sort of checking up on each other almost. If you went outdoors for a bit too long and the curtains were twitching, and how you've been out longer than half an hour and all this, and you're just popping down the shops to get some milk and various bits. I've been working in the day, but I got a bit reclusive, I think, really. And once again, I was stuck in my own four walls, which was exactly what I tried to escape the first time round. I didn't drink at home very much. I was always drinking out and about. So again, being stuck, almost forced in that time, like all of us were, I'd be lying if I wasn't very tempted to drink and sort of fast forward through that period somewhat. So in answer to your question, it's always there to some extent. I think I just learned to cope better with certain things. And this is something that I think I will have as a lifelong battle in various elements. But as mentioned before, the ups and downs are far less severe than what they are. And while sometimes I miss that escapism that alcohol provided me, I don't miss the fact that without alcohol, I'm far more present in life. And that can mean being a lot more present in some darker moments, but far more present in the better moments as well. So I'm really glad I didn't fall back on that substance during that sort of time. And whilst, again, it's 5 years ago now, I just feel like I'm still leaning that as an excuse. But I haven't got my running shoes quite back on, not permanently yet anyway. But it's one of those that, yeah, it's learning to deal with things better as time goes on, and life will still throw those curveballs. But yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that you had no purpose, that you felt lost and no direction. And you've also just mentioned the Fell Foodie. Is that giving you a new purpose, direction?
So initially, I wouldn't have said this, but as time's gone on, it does begin to sort of feel a bit like that for myself. It was at the time, again, I suppose, looking back, I think I was still wearing that mask in another way, really. I came up with this pseudonym, this nickname, because I really enjoyed cooking. From a young age, I enjoyed sort of cooking. I enjoyed the fact that, food brought people together. I had a real keen interest in ingredients and cuisines, and memories of being around my grandma's table, sort of thing, with the family and sharing things there. And when I got into the hiking, it was always about, quite quick and convenient foods, which was never something I really enjoyed, even through my time in hospitality, really, whilst it might have been just picking a few chips out the pub kitchen in those days. I still enjoyed food and enjoyed where it came from and working alongside different chefs and picking things out there. So when I got into the hiking, it wasn't about sort of taking, meal deals up there or quick or fast or dehydrated pot noodles, for example, in the hills. I quite enjoyed taking up stuff I'd made at home as little leftovers or little packed lunches to enjoy in the hilltops. So I call myself the Fell Foodie to merge those two passions. And I should maybe explain for those that don't know the north of England, we tend to call the hills fells in this part of the world. So I didn't fall over anything that way. It was more merging the passions of the hills, the fells, and food. And I just began sharing online anonymously, really, a bit like a journal. I was journaling quite a lot in my spare time. I found that a really useful practice for me in this sort of moment of change. And it began to sort of evolve into this online journal of sharing things on an online platform. And I hadn't used the likes of Instagram before. I didn't really use social media. I was quite reclusive in sort of my drinking days, really. Um, but I think when I shared my story on there, again, anonymously at first, it was just pictures of the views I was experiencing and the food I was enjoying. Sharing that on my second year sober in 2018, it just seemed to get a lot of response that had similar points of view. People had found the outdoors for means for their mental health, or people who've had people in their life who'd suffered with these sort of ailments, I guess, whether it's substance or whether it was mentally. And it really just sort of triggered something there. And they felt like a real sort of tribe community on there and a real safe space to share. And the fact that something I'd hidden for so long through fear, I guess, of embarrassment or judgment was met with that sort of opposite take, met with a real show of support and love and encouragement. So that began to feel obviously quite empowering. And then moving forward, I began to get asked to share this story a bit further on some local platforms, I guess some newspapers, and then at sort of festivals, demonstrations, and schools. And that was really the big one for me, being able to share my story there about my deepest, darkest moments and using alcohol as that escapism tool and not wanting to be here in life at all, but subsequently finding that joy in life and finding, a bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I guess, what is important in life. It was just those smaller things that put everything else into perspective. Being out in an environment like that was, it didn't matter what was going on, sort of, the gossip down the street or some little bad day at work. I mean, in the scheme of things, they were really, really minor. But sharing that story, I guess, in terms of like to schools and bits like that, picturing myself as that person in that assembly hall that didn't know what they were going through in those younger years, just suddenly started having these feelings almost overnight through puberty, really. And we didn't speak a lot about mental health and stuff back then. There wasn't people talking about issues that were going on behind the scenes as openly as they are now. So I didn't really have anyone to relate to either. It was kind of quite a full circle moment and really is some of the more powerful things I've done. I think sharing that there and encouraging the fact that it's okay to talk and you should reach out for that support and don't have to suffer in silence. So in a way, that has felt like that's become quite a purposeful act for me, to use that story, I guess, as a catalyst to encourage others to maybe find their way and bits in paths. So whilst I'm still very much, I wouldn't put myself on a pedestal at all. I'm still having my moments of ups and downs and trying to keep on the right path, but being able to sort of articulate your feelings and what you're going through at that moment and continue to go through. If that can help one other person, then it really does feel quite purposeful, yes, moving forward.
What guides you on the right path, as you just said?
What guides me? Well, those who've joined me hiking in the hills would say it certainly isn't a natural sense of direction. I tend to always come off the path at somewhat. I usually say, we'll just go up. We'll get to the top if we go up. We'll follow some stream down. But but that inner sort of compass, I guess. I don't know. I guess that there's a lot of it's self critique, really. I don't see myself as in a race with anybody else. I feel myself always trying to beat the person I was yesterday. I kind of see it as I don't really need to sit and need, I suppose, encouragement from others or even critique from others because I give a lot of that to myself all the time. I'm quite insular in that way. So that certainly guides me. It's the desire to be better, the desire to improve. Sometimes with that act of wanting to achieve, I suppose, that perfection that never comes, which can hold you back as well, and can also mean you set yourself goals that are too big, that therefore then you end up getting down because you haven't come close to them, sort of thing. And that's an ongoing battle, an ongoing journey I have. Um, but otherwise, yeah, I think it's just trying not to return to that man I was really. And again, you're looking back to those moments of really just not seeing any future for myself at all. I think anything that I've gained since, it's holding on to those moments, I guess, of joy, and there's those up moments and things that will come again. Um, yeah, it's a tough question, that one, isn't it? What will guide you there? Because there isn't really any fire lit underneath my bum that's really pushing me forward in pace. I kind of need to have that self-taught most moments. So maybe, yeah.
In terms of values, in terms of the core values, Harrison, what would you say are yours?
Well, in that moment of change, it very much was the fact that I did see myself as, I wasn't an honest person. I'd see myself as a loyal person. I didn't act loyally at that time. And I guess accountable in ways, sort of self-aware in certain paths too. So there have always been moments that I've tried to really push through in life for myself. If I make a mistake, I always hold my hands up to various bits. I've always been known as quite an honest, raw sharer on the likes of social media for what I've been going through. I don't really filter much on there in my own personal battles. So that sometimes has allowed others to engage in certain ways. So I would see that as quite a core value to myself. Um, but yeah, it's really just about trying to I think just go through passing on that sort of smile to others in certain ways. I think for me, it's kind of we go through enough bad. You never know what people are going through in their own sort of shoes, their own path to you. So I think a lot of things can go on behind the door in secrets, and no matter how bad your day is going, it shouldn't reflect on somebody else's and push onto that path, because we're all living our own little circles, aren't we? Really, we're all riding our own bikes on certain paths. So I think for me that is quite kind of one of being aware of that in certain ways, being quite stoic through certain things too, not seeing yourself as better than anybody else. Um, but honesty is quite a core value of a lot of that, I think, really, and just being honest and kind. So whilst I don't always achieve that 100%, that is definitely um, characteristics that I aim for and would hopefully see that would be aligned with myself.
And hearing what you've shared throughout your telling of your story, the things that have come to the fore for me have been joy, progress, fulfillment, contentment, nature, friendship, health, connection. What of those really strikes a chord?
I think contentment, amongst that, because I think that's something that we always strive for more or various bits or try to make changes and move forward. And sometimes being content in that moment or just really accepting what's going on at that time, especially things we can't control. I think that, again, that stoicism maybe it is important, and being content that you have done something well, or you've made a change, or sometimes you might not get the reaction you always want from certain things, but if you know in yourself that you've done all you can in that path, it's being content with those actions. And likewise in the outdoors, sometimes I try to really embrace that fact of, I'm someone that maybe likes to rush to the top of the hill and get there and achieve that thing and knock it off. And I enjoy the fact that that gives me that sense of achievement and gives me that sort of endorphin hitting, that fitness, the lungs, the heart pumping. But I can be someone that's not great at maybe sitting and almost being quite zen and just checking out the horizon and being especially this day, lots of distractions and moving forward and getting your phone out on various bits. So I think about being present in that moment sometimes. That's why I found the cooking outdoors to be quite a nice semi-busy action for my hands, but keeps me sort of enjoying nature in a different way, where I'm present, I'm content in where I am, but I'm also still doing something there that's giving me joy as well. So um, that would be the one that sticks out for me in that path. I think sometimes about even when things haven't gone so well, or bits forward, or learning things, or diving in for the first time, because a lot of this, I'd had no experience of beforehand in terms of both the journey in the hills, both a lot of sort of the cooking outdoors, the speaking side of things. I'd never shared my story in the mirror at one point, let alone getting asked to go on national television or going on these big stages at the NEC. It was a real sort of go, well, where do you start? Where do you make that leap from? So I had to really trust that fact and be content that whilst I was, critiquing how I'd performed or how I'd done or what I'd said, and I'm sure I will do the same once we finish the podcast, Amy. But it's also being content the fact that you've done as well a job as you can do at that point. You've tried to stick true to your values, and yeah. So I think that's the phrase I think that you've said. I mean, they all fit all those phrases you mentioned, but I think that one is one that maybe comes back to the point that yeah, in a world that we always strive a lot more and try to keep up with the Joneses, I think sometimes being content with what you have is also quite an important one.
And when you are feeling that contentment, how do you recognize it? What does it feel like for you?
See, that's that's very well I'm not very good at. I think that's always one that it's upon reflection sometimes. I think you can I think I look back. I don't dwell on the past too much, but I certainly use it to guide and sort of path um, and push you forward, to not make those mistakes again. I do see things that, we have opportunity coming at all directions in life for us, and you have to sometimes take that leap and go, wow, I'm going to follow this route through the woods and see where that takes me. But you don't sometimes know if that was correct or if you can take that moment until after looking back and reflecting on that moment. So for me, it's that whole thing that, you don't know almost the best days of your life, do you, until they might be still ahead. You may have already had them. It's kind of those paths, but remembering those moments of joy and using that, I think, to go forward, or trying to see the positive in certain situations. There's a lovely image I always enjoy of two people on a bus going on this road, and one side's this big drop into this wonderful green valley, and the other side's just the bare rocky cliff face. And one person's staring at the window to the cliff face, looking really sad and down, and the other person's looking out the other window, seeing this wonderful expanse and all this green wonderment and hills. And I think that is often a great metaphor for a lot of situations. We can always look at a positive situation or a negative situation in any path. So while some things, of course, you'd be like, well, there's no positive in that. That's ridiculous. There are some of those moments, but a lot of things, I think it is a lot of a mindset thing. So for me, that's definitely been a path there of trying to, not sure if some of the moments, are going to be beaten or going to be bettered in the future, but also having that moment of going, well, why not, or they may be, sort of thing. Yeah, trying to have that positive, optimistic outlook, I suppose, the glass half full.
And you mentioned just a moment ago about cooking outdoors. What do you mean by cooking outdoors? Because we're not talking about, somebody striking up a barbecue on a campsite, are we? Or what is it?
Well, see, I suppose that there's many ways this can go. I mean, for me, I tend to operate mainly in the national parks. I'm lucky to live in the Lake District these days. So living in the Lake District here, it's not appropriate to be lighting big open fires out in the natural wonderment out here and stuff. And whilst it may be quite a primal thing, and I enjoy that link to sort of that ancestral past of cooking outdoors over fire, caveman, cavewoman vibes, but in this day and age now, going and chopping loads of trees down or lighting a fire on a hilltop or a lakeside is just not going to be the done thing. I mean, there could be the risk of wildfire this time of year. You're leaving scorch marks on the ground, ruin that environment for the next person. But of course, if this was private land or on a campsite with a fire pit, then fantastic. Cooking over fire is brilliant. We're really enjoyable, really primal, really nature's television, seeing those sort of flames dance in the charcoal or wood there. So if that was the barbecue at home, certainly. And that for me, in outdoor cooking, it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It could simply even just be sitting on a park bench with a nice sort of Tupperware bit that you've warmed up, a nice food flask or some stuff for lunch on your work break. It could be taking the dog out for a walk and just enjoying, a sandwich there in a brief moment, or heading down to the coast, going for a swim, coming back and cooking something up on a little camping stove there. It could just be taking something as a takeaway and going and sit out. It doesn't always have to be the cooking side. Just enjoying the act of food in the outdoors, I think, is a really nice thing to do. And it really elevates that experience for me. I think if it's on the hilltops and there, and you go into sort of cook something up on the camping stove, trying to really create something that you would do at home. If you love your cooking like me, then this is quite an enjoyable activity. For someone that just sees food as fuel, I can imagine they're going, well, there's far too much weight going in the rucksack. Why am I going to bother doing that? Taking all the stuff, there's all the mess to clean up. I understand all that completely, but again, I see it as different levels and different stages in what you want to do. It might just be made something pre-made at home. Also, you grab from the local sort of takeaway or local business there that you enjoy to eat and enjoy in nature. It could be something you've gone to the full end of things where you, like I have at times, of making your own fresh pastas or breads in the outdoors on a camping stove and trying to really embrace the challenge and the ridiculousness, to be fair, as well, of what is achievable on a little camping stove. I never set out to really try and encourage people to do this every time on a hike or to go and walk in a big John O'Groats to Land's End, or of course big expeditions where freeze-dried meals are really important. But again, it was the little sort of smaller adventures, the micro adventures, as the adventurer Al Humphreys calls them, of just enjoying that as its own adventure, going to watch a sunset somewhere and just having dinner out there, where we used to go for the picnics perhaps. And of course, I know we tend to get a lot of liquid sunshine in the UK, so outdoor cooking can be a bit more popular on the continent than perhaps in England. But I just think that's a really fulfilling human experience, sharing food in the outdoors with somebody else and taking in nature in that way. And just having that moment to yourself as well. I mean, again, you could be working from home at the moment or working in your day job, having that lunch break away from the desk, just going for a walk around where you are. There's always green space to be found, and just having that moment of reflection and peace for yourself and enjoying that lunch on the go. I think that's what it's about for me. It's just trying to tie the two aspects, two things that I love, food and the outdoors, bringing them together in whatever means possible for yourself, whether that's barbecue, picnic, camp stove, open fire if it's permitting. But again, always making sure you leave no trace as well and pack everything back out with you and leaving that space as it was for sort of nature and the next person.
And the question, I guess, is what is achievable on a camping stove?
Well, this is one that again, this this is the challenge I do enjoy. I mean, I'm a big go the real far end here. People go, I'd never try and achieve that on the camping, and completely understandably. I mean, I was looking to put together my debut book about 18 months ago, all with like 80 odd recipes, all designed around a single burning camp stove, and it was all things from quite simple one pot stews in there to even things like an aubergine sort of katsu curry in there, where it was all bread in the aubergine, shallow frying that, doing the rice, making the sauce, even in ribboning all the sort of carrot and cucumber to sort of present on the plate there, which most people would go, what is the point in that? But I don't know, there's a little joy in me. I just seeing because I can, and because I enjoy that. And I find cooking quite a mindful experience, both at home and in the outdoors. So I just see what's really possible, just kind of, I suppose, yeah, just for the hell of it. I mean, some people might, if you boil a lot of things in life down to that sort of pointlessness. I mean, walking up a hill to come down the hill again is quite pointless, isn't it? Really. So, a lot of these things I think can be looked at that way. But I have really gone to really. I mean, this was what I was best known was cooking a cake on the hillside on television for a lady called Dame Mary Berry, and that was a real, I suppose, push both of my comfort zone and also what is usually cooked on the camping stove. But trying to bake a cake in the outdoors on a single burner overlooking Blencathra in the Lake District, it was interesting. Even for a May day, it was interesting weather at the time. Was what I'd call a challenge, and under the extra pressure of quite scrutinising famous eyes. But anything's possible, really. Whether it's a bacon sandwich in the morning, or again, just some porridge or pancakes nocturne, all the way to knocking something up again from scratch and baking out there. Again, it's always up to you. Again, getting the kids involved is a great thing to do as well. But I just find it a really nice practice. Being at the campsite, just pulling up the van somewhere, even in the car, just having something cooked up there or something you cooked at home to bring with you is just, you've created that. There's joy and love in there as well. And that is a gift. Food as that gift to others, I think, as well, is a really human thing and a great conduit for conversation and catching up. So, yeah, that's the joy that food gives me.
And I can hear it. And I love this element of creativity, of possibility, and also of mindfulness, this because I can. And let's just push the boundaries here. Let's see what is possible. And yeah, add a huge amount of pressure with Dame Mary Berry's scrutinizing eyes, bless her. I mean, that must have been, had you practiced before that?
When I first got the call to say, I mean, again, it came such a sideways movement. A lot of my life has been a very unexpected path since that moment of change, to be fair. But when I first got that call, I think the first thing I said was, that this sounds great, but I'm not going to bake her a cake. No chance. And then I stupidly had a little go at making a cake myself in my spare time, and I shared it on my social media page, and the producer saw it on the day and said, yeah, we'd like you to do that on the day, please. So I did two dishes for her. I did a nice sort of pan-seared sort of sea bass dish with a nice sort of broad bean pancetta with a lemon vinaigrette, and then I baked this lemon and blueberry drizzle cake for her afterwards. And yeah, she didn't think it was going to work either, so there wasn't really any encouragement on the day, or it was there was certainly sweat on the brow, but thankfully it made it all grand. And yeah, quite a special moment to hear the line, "There's no soggy bottom here," that's for sure.
I love it. I think it's a great story. I really do. And this possibility that is tied in with a mindset of connection and bringing in these simple moments of joy, using food as a gift to form great connection with others, and as you said right at the beginning, the relationships that you have are what it really drives you, having friendships and relationships, but understanding what nature can give and what it can inspire you to do. It just really does bring it back to this. We can take things for granted. We can, your view that you saw every day, you didn't venture into it. You just saw it as a perspective, but actually now you've put yourself into that vista and become part of the perspective.
Yeah, and that's something that, again, it can be an ongoing challenge too. And I think complacency is quite a normal thing, especially when you hear it quite often. People who maybe grow up in the countryside, they often move to the city and vice versa in past. But even being in this area now for sort of 10 years, I never thought I would ever think that way. But sometimes I can find myself falling into complacencies there. And once I get back in those environments, I go, oh no, this is exactly as it was the first time. That rush, that just sense of almost just normalcy, just human being out there. And again, I appreciate the fact not everyone has mountains on their doorstep, or they're not having the means to get to these paths. And I've done a lot of work, a lot of inner city school kids on this path as well, trying to give people that opportunity to be in the outdoors, because not everyone has that easy journey into that path, or understanding like the countryside code, or where to begin, or finding those routes and means of access. But for those that are in areas where they're not as close to mountains, there will certainly be some woodland pretty close. There'll be a local park perhaps there. There'll be a tarn or a lake somewhere. There is green space in this country in vast places, even in the cities. I mean, I used to really sort of avoid cities, really. I mean, even when I went to university, when I went to York, that felt big enough for me. That was a big city in my eyes, coming from sort of rural Cumbria, moving there. But I was going, oh no, I can't be in sort of Birmingham, London. I just had to feel so insignificant, and being there and stick out like a sore thumb, which perhaps I still doing maybe my shorts out there and saying hello to the bus driver and certain things. But but I've been really surprised in recent visits. You just see into different eyes. There's so much green space even in those spots if you look for it. So I think I'd really encourage anyone that even to walk around the block, or run after work in past. Doesn't have to be anything major, but really embrace that sort of time outdoors where you can. I don't expect people to get their camp stoves out, on the middle of the road or the pavement out there in various bits, but there's more appropriate ways in. But even just grabbing that lunch from the shop, that sandwich, and going for a walk somewhere is really important. You won't regret it. And again, just like that workout in the gym, the only workout you regret is the one you didn't do. So I think it's the same in the outdoors for me. It's just trying to get as much time out there possible. But there are moments, of course, that even I know. Sometimes crossing that threshold of the front door can seem a bit of a barrier that you just can't get over some days. And there'll be moments where I just want to go and grab a pizza from the shop and just go and sit at home. I'm not putting myself as this, again, that pedestal at all. It's all a work in progress on those paths. But I do know in myself that if I do go and do that and make that effort to go and do so, I will feel all the more content and more fulfilled for doing so. So it's trying to cling on to that feeling of how it makes me feel, to encourage myself to make that step and move forward. And certainly looking back in the previous bits, falling back onto a pint glass or that previous lifestyle wouldn't give me anything close to that sort of feeling, if anything far worse than everything around it. So the risk of that previous lifestyle and going back there is just not one that I'd want to entertain at all.
Harrison, you started this podcast saying that life doesn't come with a plan, but you've got to keep progressing forward and not looking too far ahead. You kind of just ended with that same note. It's been a really lovely circular structure. So thank you so much for sharing why you do what you do. We'll put it in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to reach out and connect and follow what you're doing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts, even just questions about maybe what they could do, or equipment wise, or again my personal journey. Again, I appreciate I'm not a medical professional, but I'm more than happy to share my lived experience with others. And you can find me at Fell Foodie on all social media platforms on my website. But it's all me. There'll be nobody else there behind the email or the messenger bit. I reply to everything I get, so please do reach out. It'd be great to hear from you. But otherwise, thank you very much for the opportunity and the platform today, Amy.
Oh, it's been absolutely magical. Thank you so much. Do you have some final words for us?
I think my final words would be that sort of, one day at a time approach, not looking too far ahead, not focusing on anybody else's opinions. For me, for so long, I put off doing things because of the fear of other people's opinion. And even when I first started running, I was very overweight. I could barely run down the street, and I was worried about what people were thinking when they're looking at me, thinking, oh, look at him out there. He can't go very fast. He can't go very far. And really, ultimately, to me, the fact I was doing more than the man that be sat at home on the sofa was always an important thing for me pushing forward. So it didn't matter how fast I was going or how far I was going. I got further each day, and it was kind of just trying to beat that person from yesterday. And you're in a race of one. There was nobody else out there. So it was focused on your own lane. If you want to go and do something, go and do it. Don't fear being that beginner. Just give it a go. Doesn't matter what they're thinking. Half the time, those people will ask you further down the line how you did that journey in yourself. So it's one of those that I think it can be a difficult mindset to get out of. And sometimes even myself, you get that maybe anxiety of walking in the gym and people looking at you and no one's bothered. They're not looking at you at all. There may be a brief eye contact glance, but they've got so much going on in their own lives. They're not looking at what you're doing. So embrace whatever you want to do. Focus on your own journey, and stick in that competition of one day at a time.
This episode's over, but let's keep the conversation going. How has this episode impacted you? Share your insights, takeaways, and reflections with actions on social media, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback creates powerful ripple effects, helping others to discover its value. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for links on how to work with me, where to buy my new book, Focus on Why, Create a Purposeful Way of Life, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and where to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.